Hello, Java Challenger. We are here in the third video, and I'm here with Jonatas. So Jonatas is doing the Challenger Developer course, and in this video, he's gonna make career questions to me, and I'm gonna do my best to answer and guide him in his career goals. How are you, Jonatas?
I'm good. Enjoy.
Very good. Thank you so much. So you can
Perfect.
start with your questions.
Yeah. As we were talking before, I started my studies trying to create an application, a cloud native application using Spring, and I was struggling a lot. I was having problem with Kubernetes because I tried to add Kubernetes on there, and I got stuck. It was not a good experience to be stuck it on there. And also doing some interviews, I realized that I need to practice more data structure and some algorithm. So I'm really in doubt how to organize this schedule because I need to practice these basic things, but I also need to learn more about Spring and microservice because the interviewers they want to heard about that too.
Yeah, well, firstly, regarding Kubernetes, I don't think you need to create an application straight away with Kubernetes, since that's not something so necessary for Java developers. So it's a lot more valuable to be able to create good and clean code with Java, to know about Spring, to know how to structure your project. And I would recommend you instead to containerize your Java application with Docker and then use ECS from AWS because it's much
AWS.
easier. Yeah, Kubernetes makes sense for really big projects, really robust projects that need an insane amount of scaling, which is not your case. So
Yep.
ECS will do just fine. Elastic Container Service from AWS. It's much simpler than Kubernetes. AWS will also manage the server for you. So ECS will deploy your service a lot more easily than with Kubernetes. So I wouldn't put extra complexity in something that won't really help you to pass in the interviews. I would make it simple. Focus on the
Amazing.
things that will make the difference. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in something that is not even helping you. Like in interviews, I'm pretty sure that they never asked you anything about Kubernetes. If they ask you something about Kubernetes, it would be something regarding the concept,
More generic. Yeah.
more generic, not something specific about implementation. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't waste my time doing something with Kubernetes. That's the first thing. So the second question is about how to balance fundamentals and the things you need to pass on the interviews. So you need to study both. So basically, that's the answer. So I would put 50-50%.
Okay.
Like as you learn the fundamentals, you learn the tools as well. Like you can't be naive and think that you're going to learn 100% of the fundamentals and then go to the tools because I think it will never end, right? Learning fundamentals or learning the tools, there'll be always something to learn. So if you wait until you learn 100% of fundamentals, you never start learning the tools and the frameworks. So I would divide the time and learn them like separate days. So I would learn data structures. I don't know. I suppose you want to learn this data structures on Mondays. And then on Tuesdays, you work on your personal project to deploy your Spring project in the cloud. I would do both. And I would also add some solid concepts to write good code and clean code. Because, there's no point if you learn all the concepts and you know Spring very well, you know Java very well, if you can't write good code. Those concepts, they have to be balanced. They have to be learned in balance because otherwise it will take forever. Like you said, like if you learn only the fundamentals, that's not enough to pass in the interview. If you learn only the tools, it's not enough as well. If you learn only clean code, it's not enough. So I would break them down. I would focus, like each day, I would focus in one topic. And I wouldn't worry too much if you get stuck somewhere. What I would focus on instead is to decide how many Pomodoros I will do in that day. And if you decide that you're going to do 2 Pomodoros a day, that's it. If you are stuck or not, doesn't matter. You stop. If you are stuck with some concept and you finished the 2 Pomodoros, you stop. Like I wouldn't be struggling more than what you decided to do with the Pomodoros. Because then if you keep on struggling on the same thing, it's easier to not continue the
Yeah,
consistency.
totally.
So it's like a marathon. Like in a marathon, you can't run too much. If you run too much, you get tired and you stop. So in a marathon, you have to control your energy. So you go slow. I wouldn't say slow, but you go slower, but you keep going, right? So without a rush and without pause. Remember that, without a rush and without pause. And the other point is that direction is more important than speed. Because imagine something, you study a lot, something that doesn't even matter for your career,
Yes.
and you speed a lot and you say, hey, yes, I'm rocking. Yes, I'm working a lot. And then you go to the interview and you say, oh my God, I was wasting my time. I was studying something with all the speed possible. And I just saw that I was wasting my time. Like I did the interview, didn't ask anything about those things that I studied. So remember that direction is more important than speed. So you need to focus on the right things. And at the same time, you can't rush thinking that you're going to learn everything overnight. It won't happen. It will take consistency. Because actually, the time we learn concepts, it's not when we are awakened, it's actually when we sleep. So it's only when we sleep that our brain will go through a process where we're going to absorb the information and really
Totally.
internalize the concept. And the other thing is that our subconscious mind is 80% more powerful than our conscious mind. And we access our subconscious mind a lot more when we are sleeping.
Yeah.
And that explains why, for example, I'm pretty sure you went through the situation many times. I've been through the situation many times, I think all developers. So they are struggling in a very complicated problem. They have no idea what they must do. But then they sleep. What happened in the following day, right in the morning, they already have the answer. So guess why that happens? Because our subconscious mind, 80% of our brain power is working in the background when we sleep. So, and it's extremely powerful. So we can't underestimate the power of our subconscious mind. And we need to use that in our favor, right? That's why it's important to balance the other points of our life, like health, do exercises, to eat well, eat healthily, and sleep is so important, right? So we can only be very sharp software developers if we sleep well, if we eat well, if we have a balance.
I'm still trying to figure it out. For example, I know that played 50-50. Okay. Did a structure algorithm one day, and the other day I'll go to my personal project. In this project, I'm using Spring, Docker. I was using Kubernetes also, but I removed Kubernetes. But considering that I want to end up with a microservice application, what is the advice? Because maybe I need to prepare a basic structure. I don't know, using Maven. I need to, okay, I want to a project like that with structure. I don't know how to start because it was just started a simple project, but I was struggling with Kubernetes. I don't know what is
Yeah.
the best direction for that.
Yeah. So the first thing you need to understand is the concept behind the scenes of microservices. So microservices, it's basically an architecture,
Yeah.
right? So microservices are basically a way to break down your projects into microservices where they are independently deployable. So, which means that each service has to be deployed in isolation. So, for example, let's suppose you are creating a simple project for, well, a very stupid example, like a microservice to save dogs and the other microservice to save cats. So, in that example, you basically create two repositories on Git. So those are the microservices, right? So in terms of code, it doesn't change much because it's just an architecture. It's an architecture style to basically have your services separate in the cloud so that you can deploy them separately. So for each repo on the GitHub, so you would have the project for the dogs and the other project for the cats. And then you would Dockerize both projects and you can use whatever DB you want: Cassandra, MongoDB, DynamoDB, Oracle, Postgres, whatever you prefer, you can use it. And then once you Dockerize both projects, you deploy those applications using ECS. And then you're going to be able to access your microservices via URL if you created the endpoint. And then you can invoke those endpoints using Postman or curl commands, whatever you prefer. And if you want to go further, you can even create a very simple UI with Angular, Vue, React, whatever you prefer. Then you can consume those endpoints. So in terms of code, it's going to be pretty much the same. The difference is that for each
Always
microservice,
separating.
yeah, for each microservice, usually you would break them through different repositories on GitHub. And then those services will talk to each other, usually via HTTP request, usually via endpoints, or we can say APIs. And on the top of that, we can also use message broker. So we could pass stupid information from the dog microservice and the cat microservice. I don't know, we could pass a dog to the service, anything, it doesn't really matter, through message broker or through an HTTP request or any other protocol you can imagine. So basically, that's the concept of microservice. Obviously, like it doesn't make much sense to create a microservice when the project is very small.
In the
But
beginning. Yeah.
in your case, it makes sense because you're learning.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it was a real project, usually it's not recommended to start it right away
I
writing
read about that.
microservices. You would break your project into separate modules, separate domain modules. And then it would break to microservices when makes sense, when the team grows, when possibly other teams want to use other programming languages, when they need to scale a very strategic point of the system, then it makes sense to break down this system and leave this microservice using a lot more computing resources so that you don't waste your money with the whole service, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if you had a huge monolith and just a small part of the system is the critical one, and then you scale the whole monolith. You would spend a lot of money. Doesn't make any sense. And the other huge problem is that when the team gets too big, it gets very difficult to manage a huge monolith project because then you have to do everything in this project, right? You have to test, you have to do the integration test, you have to integrate the code in the huge monolith, you have to go through the whole software cycle, you need to, deploy in the same server. And the other critical point is that there is only one point of failure with a monolith, and that's critical. It
Yeah.
can't happen. Or you can replicate monolith service, but imagine the crazy money would have to spend on that.
Yeah.
Would be insane. Like everything would get very complicated. So that's why in applications that needs very good scalability, not only in terms of, the tech stack, but, when it scales in terms of people, then it's crucial to break down this monolith into microservices. So microservices,
Okay.
like the concept kind of behind the scenes is modularization. So they are basically separate modules, right? But in the context of the cloud, they also need to be deployed in isolation and they have to be able to work on its own. For example, you can't share the same database. That's that goes against the concept of microservice. Because if you share the same database, you have one point of failure. And one very important concept of microservices are that they have to be resilient to failure. And if you have only one database that is going to fail, then the whole system is dead.
Yeah.
And if it is only a database from one microservice, the impact is much lower, right? So even though the infrastructure of microservices gets a lot more complex, it's the only way to handle massive scale systems. Imagine how expensive it would be to manage the Netflix system in a huge monolith.
Yeah.
Would be almost impossible, I think. So would be a mess. So I like the freedom you have with microservices because you can use any programming language you want. You can use any technology you want as long as it solves the problem. And that's why it's important to understand the concepts behind the scenes. Otherwise, to try to do something that it's not so clear will be very difficult.
Yep.
Like if the concept of microservices is not clear in your mind, it's difficult to, implement that thing. But the concept is basically an architecture. Obviously, it makes things a lot more complicated because it involves the cloud, but the code itself doesn't change much really. The concepts, the essence of the code implementation to solve business requirements problems, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah. So I'll try to see to design the business that I'm implementing. I just got an idea just to implement something. And I'll try to see if we can split in different domains, different services, and I will start from that. It makes sense. It makes sense.
That makes, yeah,
Can
total
we do that?
sense. Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. You break down your system into separate modules. You can even create the APIs to see how
Yeah,
they're going to communicate to each other. And then you start testing with Postman
good.
and you see what
I'll do
happens.
that.
You handle exceptions, you handle edge case scenarios, and try to make it as robust as possible, like a production application.
Amazing. I have one more question because we had our conversation regarding salary expectations when the hiring manager they used to ask our expectations. And I learned that is how many company they are able to share the salary range if you ask the salary range. So you don't need to give your salary expectation. You can let them share for you the salary range, and that's amazing. For me, it was mind blowing when I realized that they are open up like that. But I also noticed that we have, at least here in Portugal, where I'm based, many consultancies, many companies that they hire for other companies. And sometimes, or at least most of the times, they don't have the salary bandwidth. So in this case, when they don't know, or when they don't want to say that they don't want to say, but when they don't know the salary range, and they want me to say the expectation because they want to fit me in the companies because they hire from different companies. So they want to fit me in some specific company based on my salary expectation. In this case, what is the best way to approach?
Well, firstly, you need to do your homework. You need to know how much the market's paying,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So you need to figure out how much the market's paying for someone with your skills. And secondly, so after you have this information, you throw the highest number possible according to your research. Because obviously, if you throw a very high number, like they might even say, okay, like I won't even continue this conversation because like let's suppose, oh, like in
Cannot afford it.
Portugal, yeah, I know that in Portugal, for example, the salary is lower than most countries in Europe. Like if you ask, like, oh, I want 200K, I think that they won't even continue the conversation.
Go to United States.
Yeah, they might even say, oh, I think you are in the wrong country, my friend. So that's why we need to do the homework, know how much the market is paying. And then once you have this information, I would throw the number, at least 10% higher.
Okay.
Because if they are forcing you to give a number, it's not ideal, but when you don't have an option, just give a number. And that's why information during negotiation is crucial. If you don't have information, they're going to use it
Yeah,
against you.
exactly. Totally.
So if you don't have information, you don't have power in the negotiation. The company can say anything to you, and you have no idea if it's a good salary or not.
Or not. Yeah.
The only way to know if you negotiated well, it is if you gathered enough information. If you don't, then you might think you had a good salary. You'll never be sure if you didn't do the market research. You'll be always in your mind, and that's the danger. When you're negotiating,
Yeah, that's the danger.
you have
Yeah.
to have the information because look, the company has a lot more advantage than software developers. Firstly, because salary is a taboo. So for most developers, they don't even touch on the subject of salary. And when they do that, they put the companies in power. And then every time they're going to negotiate a salary, they have no idea if they negotiated well their salary. Because if they are afraid to talk about their salaries, they don't have information. Usually they don't have information. Obviously, there are other ways to find out about your salary, but you need to have this information and then negotiate using that in your favor.
Yeah, I have an idea about the average salary here in Portugal because I did many interviews and I was using this approach, asking them the range instead of giving my expectation. And here is really hard to have a good salary considering the European Union as a whole. And I would like to know if what I can do because I'm not interested in leave Portugal at least in a short term, middle term. I don't know. I'm not interested in leave Portugal, but I would like to work at least maybe remotely for a country that pay more than Portugal. And what I can add, I don't know, in my LinkedIn because many companies from Portugal they are reaching me with low salary, and I would like to receive different opportunities from different countries. I already updated my LinkedIn is all in English, but even all in English, I basically only receive opportunity from Portugal and sometimes Spain.
Yeah. So you can try opportunities in the US as well. In the US, they pay very well. And I know that they have lots of opportunities, lots of remote opportunities. And I know that they usually pay 5K a month for an intermediate developer, which is an excellent
It's a
salary
good
for
salary.
Portugal.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's less pressure, can have a remote job. Your English is very sharp. I don't think you would have any issue with that. And so the way I would do to get a job remotely in the US is first to look on LinkedIn because nowadays LinkedIn is the place to get a job as a software developer. And
yeah,
the other thing I would do, I would also create articles in English. Again, you wouldn't have any problem doing that because your English is very good. I would document my learning. So,
amazing.
for
Yeah,
example, in your personal project, document your learning. Create an article on LinkedIn, and you're going to see recruiters. You're going to see that the visibility from recruiters on your profile will increase a lot. So, I would deliver at least one article a month. And
good number.
I would mix your learning. I would document the learning and would put that in the article because that would create super powerful LinkedIn profile and a good CV. Like that's a proof that you know about microservices, for example. So that's what I would do for now. Like
Amazing.
I would look for only remote positions in the US and see how it goes. I would do interviews for that, for intermediate Java developer.
Okay. I'll have a look at it.
Very good. Any other questions?
As far as I remember, no.
Amazing. So
It-
that's pretty much it then. Thank you so much, Jonatas, for your questions.
Thank you.
They were very thoughtful and I hope I could help you. And yeah, thank you so much for making the questions, exposing our career challenges. And yeah, that's it. That's the third video of the Java Career Boost series with Jonatas. Jonatas, thank you again for being here. And it was a pleasure
Thank
talking
you.
to you and guiding you in your career challenges.
Been an amazing experience. Been an amazing
Thank you,
experience.
thank you so much, Jonatas. Bye bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.